Thank you for inviting me into such an awesome audience. I hope, can you see? Because I'm making a little game and you need to be able to see it. I mean, what is this about? This is what it's about. I've been reading the papers last day and there's a guy who has a big red button on his desk in his office and his works compared to the other guy who also have a big red button that maybe works. And that was, as you know, the introduction said, I mean, the games of every day has these, these associations to this big red button. And this big red button often has a sign saying, don't touch the red button. And what does it make in you? Right? Anyway, there's a little game in this. This morning, I'm producing a certain amount of book titles and book covers, and I'm putting it hidden in my screenshots. And by the end, we will find a winner who got the right number, and we have an awesome gift donated from CreativeMornings. Well, that's a joke. Anyway, so, I mean, join in if you want, and let's see if I can keep you awake the next 20 minutes or so. As I said, good morning. I would like to introduce myself just to give you kind of a context what kind of animal I am. I'm basically a theater guy. I mean, I was born and bred and went to Greece in a very early age and was smitten by the bacteria of theater when I was 5 and never looked back. But you know, theater and culture is not what really makes you earn money, and when you have kids and so on, you need to get some money, and that's much more money in games. Anyway, I actually started gaming in '75 with Pong. I think I was one of the first persons in Denmark trying to play Pong. And in '96, I had a chance to join a company, and we did this game. I did a couple of these games, and that was where I learned to produce games, write games, direct, and so on. And if any of you have played these games and couldn't come through, it's my fault. I'm sorry. Blame me. I admit it, this was my learning ground, and we tried to do our best, but you know, sometimes that is not even enough. Next on, I moved to Norway to do some really rocket science, and that was these massive multiplayer games called Anarchy Online. And I think the beauty of this one, it didn't work. So when it came out and people tried to cancel their subscription to the game, even the cancel button broke down. So I have to say, they asked me, can you get on board on this and lead this project? It only took a couple of weeks. 2 years later, I escaped and got to this company. Hitman, I was doing a lot of sort of background work. I wasn't making Hitman. Hitman was made by 70-something people in Denmark, 100 people in around the world, etc. So these teams are multidisciplinary, and there goes a lot of money, investment, and into it. I think the latest Hitman game is up around 300 million kroner in production value plus the marketing thing. So it's big investments. And the games market is very hit-driven. And I'm just saying now, I'm not going to talk about sales numbers. I'm not going to predict about what will be the next big thing, because paradigm shift is what goes on every day. I'm trying to go a little bit deeper into what we do every day when we do computer games. But a question to you, how many of you have been playing the last 24 hours? Okay, the last week? Okay, so half of you have never played a game, huh? Or what? Some who has never touched a game? Okay. I'm not going to talk about game philosophies and game design. If you have questions, please address it, and I can come into it. But I think that's something you can open a browser and you can write game design and there you go, all right? So I'll go to something else. When I did this, I actually went to do some politics in Denmark. I stopped in Io and began to do the Spilordningen, which is the Danish National Film Institute that grants some money, ridiculously few. And I was basically one of the first guys to come in and try to tie together as a kind of a way to grant money without getting the industry used to getting money. Because I think that's a danger when you support things. Basically, you should, it's like with children. You don't want to have your children living at home when they're 35 and you have to clean their clothes, right? You want them to be able to stand on their own legs. And I think that was some of the things we actually got into this kind of grant system. When I'm not doing games, I'm doing this. And that is, at the moment, I'm a director, writer, and producer, and the last couple of years I've been writing the biggest Viking play in Denmark. It's a social thing in southern Jutland, in Jels, south of Kolding, where 500 people gather from early January until mid-August and create a kind of a game. It's a play with 10, 12 horses, Viking boats, etc. in this amphitheater setting. And they have a turnover about 5 to 7 million kroners every year. So it's big business, and it's all driven by volunteers who collaborate with so-called professionals. But when I'm not doing that, I'm actually earning my everyday money working with these guys. And these are the 100+ students at something called DADIU. And DADIU is the Danish Academy for Digital Interactive Entertainment. It's also a test when you're drunk. If you can't pronounce it properly, you're drunk too much. But these games, you see these icons in the bottom, those were the games that the students made last year. The students in DADIU comes from master and candidate university level educations, and we have currently 17 different universities and educations collaborating, sending students, and I think that's the only place in the world that has been able to actually make 17 educations to collaborate and sending their students and a little bit of money so we can run this thing. And every year we have these 100+ students coming in and doing games for a 15-week period. So we take them in, and basically we have coders, designers, audio designers, business people, etc., and team them up in 6 teams, and each of them create a game in that short time. You may find the games in the Play Store, and sometimes some of them is also on the iOS Play Store. And I'm talking from here because we are actually working every day with future technologies, which I think might interest you. And if there are anything that's unclear, please raise a hand and I address it immediately. The first thing I'm going to talk about is actually something called motion matching. Any one of you ever played FIFA football? Okay. Those movements by the players on the field, they're of course they're animated. What you do in computer games is basically you make a character, kind of you could say a wireframe character. You know what a wireframe character is? It's basically hvad hedder hønsenet? Er nogen der ved det? Chicken wire. It's like if you make a sculpture of chicken wire, and then you wrap some paper around it and that you do inside the computer, and that is sort of imposed on a 2D screen, 2D plane, and that's the computer screen. This is a 2D surface, and you can basically, by mathematical solutions, locate things from what's happening in 3D behind it, and you see these 2D aspects of it. And that's a lot of technology go behind the walls, but that's what we do. This kind of motion matching, you can get this character to move. And often the hard thing is not to get it moved, but to make it look nice. For example, deformations of such a character, you see what happens here, it sort of deforms. Shoulders is often a place where it looks horrible if it isn't done right. And some of these things, they suck a lot of money in producing. So what we want to do is actually make the animators, instead of make people go like this for hours, that's all these kind of run cycles. You have all these movements of a character, they're divided into sort of, I'm moving forward, I'm turning, I'm jumping, I'm crouching, etc., etc. All these things are cut into smaller pieces. And what we do with motion matching is basically, instead of sitting and do it sort of, we're locking all the movements. What we do is that we have a character on screen and we have a database with all the movements. And by technology, we can, by looking at the surface the character is moving on, what kind is going upwards, downwards, rolling, whatever, we can apply the right animations to the character and sew these animations together so it looks nice. That sounds like we're trying to do all the animators without work, but that's not the intention. Actually, the idea is to take all these animators who sits for hours and days to do these quite tedious job and move it to something that actually use their speciality more and let the mundane work be done by the technology. Doing this, I mean, this is not what we're doing, that's just an example because it's coming more and more. Ubisoft, one of these big game companies, is basically rolling out in most of their games with a lot of movement in it. In Denmark, we have a game company. We have a company called Rococo, and they do this suit, which is it's okay for its price. It's really cheap, and what you can do is you can put it on yourself, and you can move around in a space without too much iron around you, and it basically records your movements based on some certain spots here, here, and here, and you basically have this kind of a stick character moving around. This stick character you can put into one of these wireframe characters and make that one move, right? And that one cost, I think, $1,500, and here you go. You're ready to begin to do some movement data you can put into your database. On top of this, that's something we're beginning to do now. We do deep learning or machine learning. What we do, we have an algorithm that basically looks at these animations that is applied to the character. So we have an algorithm looking at it, and we taught this algorithm what looks nice. So basically, this algorithm looks at the other algorithm and improves it. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And we are collaborating with computer science, the computer science department in Copenhagen to develop this and basically roll it out so everybody can use these systems. It's not about avoiding and getting people out of work, but basically moving people to what actually takes human power, human talent, and what is mundane could be done by machines. Another place I see computer games is changing is basically in the interface and gestures. So how do we interact with the computer? And I think some of the big paradigm shifts we've seen in the last years is basically on how to interface with the engine. For example, Nintendo's stick it had some years ago, and you could basically wave the stick and try not to hit Granny while you're doing it, and that get the computer to react on it. And I think we will see much more of this. I think Steven Spielberg was right when they created this, and Alec McDowell, when they basically created this vision of you could actually handle things in thin air and create these things. I think this is a picture from late 16 from MIT, where two students is using a pair of iPads and basically using kind of same system so they can recognize hand movements. And I think we will see much more of that because the sensors in there. We have a camera, we have a microphone, we have a gyrometer, so we have a lot of elements we're using so we could actually begin to wave our hands in front of the computer and actually make it go. So that's another notion of it. What I also see is that a beginning trend to move into computer games actually move into actually get alive. So we see it's not only locked in the screen, but we also see it begin to move into real life. So this interfacing between what you have on the screen and basically what you could have on the floor is something we will see much more of. I think Disney has something called Infinity that sort of basically have some small characters. You can see they interact with what's happening on the screen. And I see these robotics, as you can see here, as a prosthetics actually go in there and help, but you can also see it in this kind of thing. You begin to see them playing football or things like that. But I mean, imagine having Donald Duck or Tintin or something as a physical thing running around on your floor at your table and beginning to do stuff. And I think that's not more than 5 to 8 years away. It comes into a price, and these micro robotics actually is beginning to see business reality, so we can see it in here. Another thing which we basically a couple of years ago dreamt that was impossible is basically everybody can go down and buy a drone and fly it around. I have a neighbor who flies all the time in the backyard, and he's highly annoying because it makes a lot of noise. Anyway, I mean, this one could actually be supplied with a camera and a microphone, and you could begin to do races in the streets or wherever you want. So I think this is also something we'll see much more of. But I think the trick to computer games in general in the future, we will see it in the sensors, the different kinds of sensors, and the availability and the price range of these actually makes it's much cheaper. I found this picture and I found it irresistible. It looks like the big red button from the beginning. But this is actually a 360 camera that was presented at CES this year. And it is down in a price range of, you know, 500 euro, dollars or things like that. So it's actually becoming everybody's, within everybody's price range. And I think this, with the sensors falling in price and also the production, as you probably heard in many other cases, the production tools are so cheap, if not free, so basically everybody can express themselves and begin to develop games, which I think makes it tremendous fun to be in the games industry right now, because you see all these different games coming out from basically nowhere. Nobody expected it, and it's made by 1 or 2 or 3 people sitting together and doing something. Braid, for example, came out some years ago. It was made by one guy, and I think the other game, Minecraft, was also made by a very, very small team, Swedish guy, and I think he's good for $2 or $3 billion today. So I think we will see much more of these disruptive and crazy ideas coming up because the availability is there. I mean, it's the same thing in the film industry. I work at the National Film School, and the big threat at the big National Film School is actually when you have a photographer student coming in, they already know the camera. So back in the days, we had to use a year or 1.5 years to teach them using the camera, but that's not necessary today. So we actually have to teach them different things. And the funny thing is that the more technical things, this technology gets available to people, the more we have to teach classic things. So what I do at the film school is actually I'm doing a lot of courses in Shakespeare and Ovidius and all the old shit. I call it the old shit. In the course program, they don't call it that. They call it classics. But you know, immediately we call it the old shit because that's what it is. It's shit until someone takes it up and sort of revives it and actually gains what's the idea behind all the old stuff. So the photography teacher is talking philosophy these days and basically how to frame pictures nicely. And so we're moving back to ideas from painting and other stuff that actually goes 200 or 300 years back. Another thing I think we will see is this is not future, this is actually a couple of years old, this image. And I think this kind of sort of overlaying realities and bringing in you know, data on what you're seeing is something that today feels very foreign, but I think in 10 years that will be the norm. Yeah, I think it's really, really close. I mean, think about it, the smartphone came out 2007 and the tablet came out in 2010. So it's only 8 years ago we began to have tablets, and today basically everybody's completely confident with this tablet. My mother, she's 84, and she's definitely not a PC user or computer user. But I mean, when we gave her that one, her husband was complaining she doesn't want to go to bed with me anymore. She wants to play with her computer. The thing I think what we'll see here is that the interfacing becomes more natural. I can touch things. You see small children, they go to the screen and they begin to touch the screen because that's natural. I touch it and something happens. I swipe it, I shake it, and that what affects the thing inside the machine. And I think that kind of tying things together with a kind of a natural, it's not natural to put your hand on a mouse and do it like this. It's somewhat natural, but it's a little bit weird actually. But actually, if you could sit as in Minority Report, basically grab things, move them around, and you're basically looking out in the air. I mean, I think that will become common in a couple of years. I mean, some years ago, if people were talking with themselves on the street, they were crazy. Today it's because they're talking telephone. So that seems the range of sensors in our home is growing logarithmically, and I see you've seen all these computers and loudspeakers that's listening to what you're saying and your wishes, and you basically can go like Google, please buy tickets for this film, and it starts, you know, it basically understands what you're saying and can begin to order tickets for you. So this amalgamation between, you know, sensors, deep learning, so it can basically go from spoken words to instructions, and combining it with a business case and the internet actually create this called the Internet of Things. And I think all that will tie in and become part of the gaming in the future. Also in theater, I think, if you could make a play, for example, in your home with, you have these, the machine actually finds out you have 3 or 4 of these loudspeakers and immediately begins to divide the voices in different loudspeakers and so on. So you suddenly have a 3-dimensional experience of listening to a play or to a book. I think that will become very, very ordinary. Some years ago, everybody said the radio was dead, and today podcast is the crazy shit. So I think, you hear a lot of these things. People want you to drop your PC because now the PC is dead. I think basically it layers on top of each other. It's very seldom we see technology becoming completely redundant, except for the floppy disk. Anyway, the future, to keep it a little bit short, I think the future is great, and yes, let's push that button, except for Mr. President this and President that. Please don't push the button and don't play these games. But I think gaming is what play is to children. It's a way of dealing with natural life. I just talked with Mikkel, sorry. I'm interviewing 150 people these days, so names these days are a little bit obfuscated. I think what we see is that games is a kind of a mimical, small animals, they play hunting or they play fighting. Small children, they play mom and dad. And I think play, if we look at play as Mr. Johan Huizinga did back in the 30s and wrote the book Homo Ludens, The Playing Human, you will see that the rules of play are equal to everyone, no matter where you come from in the world. We just talked about this little sound, da 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 da. You know that? We're several cultures here today. Any one of you never heard that one before? Na 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 na. No, it's the same. I've been in Siberia, the new year. I've been in Africa, the new there, and so on. So that's things that binds us together. For example, stupid tunes and things like that, but also rules of play. A play is always voluntary. Nobody plays all the time. So play is always outside of the ordinary situation. A play has clear rules. So it's very, very important when you play hide and seek, are we counting to 10 or are we counting to 30? When I was a kid, it was really important to only count to 10 because I couldn't count more. So that rule was really important to actually be able to be participating. Are we hiding only in the garden, also in the house? Or where else? All these rules, it takes always a lot of negotiation. And that is basically part of every play you have, every kind of game you have with other people. And I think that's children behavior is what you see in this playing behavior, what you see in computers, basically the same. It has to be fun, it has a social element, and it basically have this, this idea that it is important. Which is, of course, not. It's not important at all. We're not changing the world yet. Anyway, how many books did you get up with? 9. Any others?
8.
14? Okay. Whatever. Okay, here's the truth. You're right. We have a winner! Oh my God! Woo! How does it feel to win?
The gift is twofold. So first of all, you get a very special croissant. And you get a fidget spinner. There you go.